Louisa May Alcott once said, "The power of finding beauty in the humblest things makes home happy and life lovely." This is a talent I think Alcott clearly had, to find beauty in the simplest things in life. And she used that ability to write some of her most beloved novels, including her most famous, Little Women. Hello, it's Audrey, and today I want to talk about three adaptations of Little Women: 1994, 2017, and 2019. Little Women has a very personal connection to me now because I just had the amazing privilege this past spring of playing Jo March at my homeschool co-op. So I want to look at character portrayals before looking at the adaptations based on their overall merit. And again, I might give away details about the story in my analysis. So if you haven't read Little Women or you don't remember it yet, or you want to watch one of the movies I'm going to discuss, then I would say pause the video, do whatever it is to that you need to not have the spoilers, and then you can come back. Alrighty. The first character portrayal we're going to be looking at is Marmee, the March Girl's mother. In third place is Emily Watson from 2017. She can be somewhat tender with her girls, but her Marmee just is constantly worried or very emotional. And when you think Marmee, you think of this woman who's this loving, serene presence whom her girls can look up to as someone whom they want to imitate and whom they can confide in. And Watson's portrayal just didn't really give us much of that. In second place, we have Susan Sarandon from 1984. Her Marmee is definitely a lot calmer than Watson's, and you get the impression that Marmee is different from most mothers with how she raises her girls. But her Marmee does seem to have a bit more of an activist stance, which I wouldn't say is an inherently bad thing, but I just think our top Marmee really embodied the character in a way that I found really endearing and very understanding of why her girls really look up to her and cling to her so much, which is 2019's Laura Dern. I was a little nervous about what her portrayal was going to be like because the first thing we see of her is her opening the door to Lori, Meg, and Joe, and she has this apron on and she's kind of not expecting them. But no, you can tell she loves her life. She's very serene and she's very tender, caring with her girls. And she does have her vulnerable edge, especially when Beth dies. But I think if you had to summarize Jern's performance in one word, it would be motherly. And I feel what could be a greater compliment to someone who's trying to portray Harmony than to be told, "Oh, your portrayal's so motherly." The next character we were going to look at is that of Lori, the March's neighbor. Of all the character portrayals I had to rank, this one's the most competitive. Go figure. They're all so good, especially when it came to the top two. All right. In third place, we have Christian Bale from 1994. I haven't watched 1994 in a while. I need to see it again at some point because I really like it. Um, he is very honest in speech and he can make some hilarious facial expressions. Um, but I feel like his portrayal probably isn't quite as boyish. It has a slightly more mature edge, but this isn't an inherently, but I don't think this is bad. It's just maybe because I always think of Laurie as being more of a boyish person, especially when we first meet him, because he's what, 16, 15 when we're introduced to him. And I mean, he does grow up, but yes, I do like my Lord to have a little more youthfulness to him. And I really like the way Christian Bale did the proposal scene in this movie. I would play a clip, but I don't think the audio works very well with what I'm using. But what I noticed that he does is he starts out rather calm and quiet, and he's giving all these well thought out reasons for why he and Joe should get married. And he's got this hopefulness and this contained energy with him. And then when Joe rejects him, then his temper starts to mount and he looks like he's about to cry. And you can tell he's getting angry and that he's about to set himself up for this inner turmoil and conflict. Our runner-up is Jonah Hauer-King from 2017. I think he bears the most physical resemblance to Laurie. He has a very supportive edge to this character with the way he helps the marches through things like getting Marmee to Washington, getting Amy to Aunt March, and comforting Joe through Beth's bout of scarlet fever. And Howard King manages to make Laurie always tease a person in a way where he's laughing with them rather than at them. And so his Laurie's just very good-natured in general, but I feel we could have seen more of his idleness or how he kind of let Joe's rejection sink him and make him very idle afterward. Our number one Laurie is Timothy Chalamet from 2019. He just has this way of endearing you from the very beginning. I mean, just look at his eyes. They've just got this very wistful note to them. And he really embodies the character super well with the way he has his hands in his pockets whenever he walks and the way he'll sometimes jump. And he just, and his character has this great goofy side to him. I'm thinking about the attic scene when Joe's like, I want to introduce Laurie into our club. And once she gets all the girls to agree, he jumps out of the closet and starts talking like an old British guy. Um, and I, the proposal scene to Joe, it's a very interesting contrast the way Chalamet does it to the way Bale does it. What the former does, as I said before, Christian Bale starts out rather calm and hopeful, and it ends with him starting to have this inner turmoil that's sort of ignited by Joe's rejection. Chalamet gives us the opposite. You can tell from the start that he's had this turmoil going on inside of him for a long time, and he starts off by shouting about how much he loves Joe and how hard he's tried to please her. And he has this energy from the start. And at the very end, when he says, you'll meet someone, Joe, and you'll love him and live and die for him because that's your way, and I'll watch. He does it where he's kind of exhausted and he's totally going to despair. And you get this impression that Joe's rejection sort of was the last straw in a way that took the life out of him and sort of made him feel like the struggle within him had ended and like, oh, there's no hope for me left. That was just an interesting thing I noted. Now we're going to look at the March sisters, starting with Beth. In third place, we have Eliza Scanlon from 2019. I wasn't sure of her portrayal at first. It looked like she was just going to be on the screen reciting her lines, but her Beth has a will about her, this quiet determination that you don't see often because Beth, we think of her as being very shy, but she does show that she will step out of her comfort zone and try to go out into the world whenever she believes it's the right thing to do, such as with when Mr. Lawrence wanting her to play the piano at his house, and later they have this whole thank you exchange for what they've done for each other. But I feel like she didn't have much screen time, and we didn't get a lot of depth into her. Beth's personality with this version. I should have mentioned this earlier, but the thing with Little Women that makes it so tough to compare the different adaptations is because it's not a linear book, and it in the sense that it doesn't follow one person's perspective throughout. It's that, but it jumps around for different people, and there's so many different things you can choose to focus on that some characters may get more screen time than others. And so I feel like Scotland's Beth just wasn't given a lot of attention for me to examine her deeply as a character. Our runner-up is Annis Elby from 2017. She really conveys Beth's fear of the world. I'm thinking about how she tries, I think twice, to go to Mr. Lawrence's house and play the piano, and she gets there, but before she knocks on the door, she turns around and walks back home because she's just too scared. And considering we view Beth as the childlike sister, Elvy's portrayal has this maturity, and she really grows up more, I think, than we see Beth usually does in adaptations. Um, but I think my top Beth would have to be Claire Danes from 1994. I think she was only 14 when she played this role, and so you can really see her youth setting her apart from the other girls. And she's very childlike and home-loving, and you can tell she's not comfortable going out and being among a lot of people. But she seems content with this. Like she doesn't regret being a homebody or being, and when she dies, she says to Joe something like, "Why does everybody want to leave home?" And so I think she just does a great job of capturing Beth, sort of what makes Beth, like the quiet, gentle presence that we don't think much of. But when she's gone, everyone feels the void. Next sister is Meg. In third place is 1994's Trini Alvarado. She's very feminine and proper, and you can tell she's discontent and she wants to be someone else. I remember during the Moffat's party, she's talking to Lori and she's like, "Oh, I wanted to see what it was like to be a girl who had 20 pairs of gloves and engagement rings." And he tells her, "You're worth more than girls like that put together." Um, but after she gets married, she basically just disappears. And I would have liked to see more of her marriage to Mr. Brooke. Um, so it's not anything to do with Alvarado's acting that I bumped her to the bottom. It was just because the film didn't give her as much attention as the other two adaptations here. A runner-up is 2019's Emma Watson. Her Meg is very self-conscious and conscientious and is definitely takes things very seriously. And I liked getting to see her struggles with poverty as a young wife and mother, but I think more emotion could have been shown at times coming from her. But it was interesting to see her take Meg from a more mature stance. But our number one Meg is Willa Fitzgerald from 2017. I think she gets points for bearing the most physical resemblance to the character, and she's just got this girlishness and hopefulness to her, which I think is are two major characteristics of Meg. And Fitzgerald's performance has this vivacity to her that I think we wouldn't often think about when we think of Meg March, but I really like it. And a key example of this is when Aunt March says, "If you marry Mr. Brooke, I'm going to disinherit you." And she clearly has this spunk and and she gets excited and she's like, "I'm going to marry whom I please." And when she realizes, "I love Mr. Brooke," she starts laughing because poor Brooke is right there in the room hearing Meg's aunt abuse him. And once she does become mom, you can see this tenderness really manifest itself when the whole family's coping with Beth's death. And there's one scene that really stands out to me where she's talking to Joe and she points to Joe's poem in a newspaper and says, "It's beautiful what you've written." And this idea of the bond between them has not changed, even though life has changed. Now we're going to look at Amy. In third place, we have Catherine Newton from 2017. Um, when we think Amy March, we tend to think, the bratty, prissy, neurotic, self-righteous sister who kind of pushes everyone around and gets Laurie in the end. And at the beginning, Newton plays this stereotype too much. Um, and sometimes I found it difficult to see her development arc, but there is this really sweet scene where she and Laurie realize that they fall in love with each other. And so I'm not mad that her Amy got Laurie in the end. All right. Our runner-up is 2019's Florence Pugh. Uh, Her performance is 50-50 for me. I wanted to put her first, but her young Amy just reminded me too much of an adult impersonating a bratty little kid. I get it. It's very tough to portray someone who's a lot younger and more immature than you are. But once we get to adult Amy, Pugh is absolutely excellent. She's refined. She's got this, she's very self-conscious, and you can tell she's got these dreams, but she can't quite fulfill them about being an artist. We really are given perspective with her, seeing her try to understand her expectations, the expectations of others, and balance that with her own feelings and what she really wants in a marriage. But again, because her younger Amy, I just didn't believe it. I'm going to have to give the top slot to Kirsten Dunst and Samantha Mathis, who respectively played younger and older Amy in 1984. I think it made sense to have a character like Amy portrayed by two actresses in this case. Um, Kirsten Dunst is so great as this pushy girl who cares a little too much about how she ranks among her classmates and others, and worries a little too much about the future, but she can also be really cute and lively. And then Samantha Mathis brings Amy this sense of, excuse me, refinement and frankness, but she also has this compassion to her that I feel we don't often tend to see in Amy. Um, One little example of this is when she's trying to help Joe, when she's trying to break the news to Joe that Aunt March has decided to take Amy instead to France. And she knows like Joe's really wanted to go, and Joe's also dealing with the fact that she just had to reject Lori. Mathis does it where in a way where she's trying to, soften the blow and also console her sister. And I also liked seeing her come back from Europe and be like, Joe, do you be honest with me as your sister? Are you upset at all that Lori and I got married? And Joe's like, oh no, I was just surprised. So I think these two actresses did a great job of helping Amy make sense as a character and be believable the whole movie. And finally, we're going to look at Joe. In third place, we have Saoirse Ronan from 2019. Her Joe is super determined and excitable. And she did have her moments, especially the proposal scene, but I just didn't see her as the character. Maybe part of it is she has a high-pitched voice that's kind of soft. And when I think Joe, I guess because the character is a tomboy, I think of someone with a bolder or a deeper voice. Um, and also, I guess Ronan didn't dissolve quite into the awkward tomboy for me with her physicality and the way she tried to force out words like Europe, oh, that's capital. I think those words need to, come out sounding a little more natural. Like she has to say them really without thinking about it because she's just gotten into the habit of using words like that. But the way Ronan did it just sounded more forced from when I'm watching scenes from 2019. And so I think that's and maybe also just because she's blonde, and I think I tend to picture Joe as a brunette with yeah. Our runner-up is Maya Hawke from 2017. She's hit most of the aspects in general. She's affectionate, tomboyish, blunt, stubborn, and so I think she's excellent overall, but her voice could have had more variety, I think, because it's deep and has this somewhat soft edge to it, but sometimes she can sound a little monotone and she could when she could have definitely raised the pitch of it at times. And also, actually, I don't have any other critiques. But the number one Joe March, in my opinion, is Winona Ryder from 1994. She, from what I remember, just hits all the aspects of Joe March on the head. And she's got this drive and these dreams, but she doesn't know how to reach, but she doesn't seem to be able to fulfill them. And you can tell her Joe really grows as a writer and as a person. In terms of physical appearance, she probably was a little too pretty for this role. The first time I watched this film and before Marmee was kissing all the girls by name goodnight, I thought she was Meg. Um, I know I talked earlier about thinking Joe needs a deeper voice. Ryder's voice is higher pitched, but it's got more of this decisiveness and it's definitely louder than Ronan's. And so I think that kind of makes up for it, for the pitch. But and I just love her. For me, she is Joe. Finally, we're going to look at these adaptations as a whole. In third place, we have the 2019 movie. It's been growing on me. I think I like the scenes individually when I watch clips, but just the way they were strung together just made the script feel really disjointed for me as a whole, especially with the way they're constantly lining up Beth's bout of scarlet fever from which she recovers with her final illness where she ends up dead. And especially after her funeral, it goes right to Meg's wedding where we see Beth in the garden. So, I mean, if you know the story, then it's not going to trip you up. But with flashbacks, I feel it can sometimes seem like you're trying to tell two different stories at the same time. And the point is that you want them to eventually merge together and become one cohesive narrative. But with the way the flashbacks were done here, it just felt like they were trying to tell two different stories at the same time, and they never merged with each other. And also, I think the relationship between Professor Bear and Joe just wasn't adapted very well in this adaptation. He appears a little bit at the beginning, and the last encounter that she has with him before she leaves to go back to Massachusetts, from what I remember, it's that she asks him to read her work and he's critiquing it. And he's like, I just don't think it's very good. And then she gets mad at him and is like, who made you the high priest of what's good and what's bad? The world may forget Professor Bear, but the world will never forget Joe March. So I'm just like, Joe, didn't you ask him for help? How are you going to grow as a writer if you're if you're not accepting any criticism? And three, you just seem so arrogant to me right now with that last statement about the world remembering you. Just and sh they just never make that quarrel up, even though the implication is that she does love him and he loves her. That storyline just I felt really suffered. But this film does use a lot of Alcott's original writing, and I do like the costume design and the cinematography and just locations. A runner-up is the 2017 miniseries. As a miniseries, of course, this would cover more of the story, and I do like the way Mr. March was there because I feel oftentimes he comes home from the war and then he just disappears for the rest of the movie. But there are some really nice scenes here where he's giving Joe advice, and he's portrayed as a very wise, caring father who's interested in his daughters and their dreams and what they want and their feelings. I just really appreciated seeing that. And I love the production design of this one. I think this one gets the award for best costumes. And I think also the award for actresses who bear most resemblance to the March sisters. But sometimes I feel the story could drag a little bit. And I still feel like Amy and Laurie couldn't have their relationship in this one could have been developed a little better. That was one thing I forgot to mention with 2019. I think a bit two big strong points with the 2019 film is one, we it's easier for us to see why Laurie and Amy ended up together, and you're like, oh yeah, this is the way it should have been. And two, we got to see more of Meg and John's married life and their struggles with not being super financially well off. But in my opinion, the number one adaptation of Little Women is the 1994 movie. My aunt described this movie as having a very cozy feel, and I get that. And considering the film's only 2 hours long, the flow is amazing. Like, they cover so much, and it doesn't feel rushed. I love the score. But the one thing I would critique, I mentioned this earlier, is that after Meg gets married, she basically just disappears until she's talking to Joe right before Beth dies. Um, but I also really like the way with this one that how they handled Joe's dreams of being a writer. You hear her do all these voiceovers throughout the movie, and then while you're watching her as a try to write a good story, but she can't necessarily seem to come up with something super profound and super personal. And then when Beth dies, she starts writing in the attic and you hear more voiceovers, and then it makes sense to you. And so I think I just really love this. This is the definitive adaptation of Little Women for me, and I gotta watch it again. All right, that is it. Thank you so much for watching this. Let me know your thoughts on Little Women and its adaptations in the comments below, especially what you think. Especially the big question, should Joe and Laurie have ended up together? I personally think Alcott ended the story the way it should have. Thank you so much for watching, and God bless. Bye!